Hi guys, welcome to this next quick Q&A. This one is again the series of the quick Q&A month that I'm doing now in June. So if you want to see the previous ones, go to patreon.com/Demeere. And if you still want me to answer your question, well, hit me up on Facebook. That's the best place to do it. And I'll see what I can do. So with that said, I'll answer Pat Johnson's question. He says, "Hi Wim, one of the things I like about you is that you're still learning and trying to get better even after decades of practice. What teachers or practitioners in the martial arts inspire you and why? Thanks." It's a good question, Pat. Well, there's a bunch of people, and I'm mainly going to talk about my teacher because they've had the biggest influence and had an influence for the longest time. So that's why I'm going to mention that first. And also it's because it's the polite and proper thing to do. So, there are a bunch of other people that I could mention who've also had a significant impact, but then, the video would run way too long, so I'm not going to do that. But I haven't forgotten them. So first there's Patrick Couder, who's my main Tai Chi Chuan teacher. He's not well known because he's not trying to be in the limelight or anything, but he's an extremely skilled practitioner. He's very humble, but he can kick your ass. And at the same time, he's also an extremely generous teacher. And he was always very good to me because I came to his class already having had a lot of training, and I was fairly accomplished as an external style martial artist, as a full contact competitor, but I knew nothing about Tai Chi Chuan. And I thought it was just some, the thing that old people do in the park. And the guy who told me about my teacher's class said, no, these guys actually fight. So I'm like, okay, I'll see what that's all about. And first class, they tossed me around like it was nothing. I mean, the smallest guy in class, and I was already a heavyweight back at the time, could toss me around and the harder I tried, the quicker I ended up on the floor. So I was like, okay, I need to learn this, and I signed up straight away. So it mustn't have been easy for my teacher to work with me, given that I did everything wrong from the perspective of Tai Chi, and also that I had very strong ideas about how you should fight and what real violence is like. But he was always very kind, always very patient, always very generous. So it's thanks to him that I actually found a different path of martial arts, which I'll mention in a little bit. Because he's been good to me, I try to be good with my students as well. So I try to follow his example. And the final part that I want to mention is again, he's actually a quite impressive artist. He does specific works of art that he scratches with an iron pen and zinc plates to make these huge tableaus, basically that depict various things. He's been recognized as an author, as an artist. Sorry, has numerous exhibitions, so he's quite good. I never knew about it until his teacher told me. He was extremely humble. So, and he has a right to brag, in my opinion, because he's really good. But he doesn't. And I actually had to ask him about it, like, hey, is there a place where I can see your work? So I tried to follow that example as well, try to be a little bit more humble, because when I was younger, I was more of a loudmouth. I was very opinionated. I still am, but I tried to shut up more and take a cue from my teacher and just try to be humble, not talk too much, not talk too much about other people, and just do my own thing, and we'll see what happens then. So Patrick is the first person that is an inspiration to me. Then we move on to his teacher, Dan Doherty. Dan's been practicing martial art for an extremely long time, and he basically created an organization here in Europe, but also internationally, for Tai Chi Chuan when there wasn't much, and he created one of the biggest organizations in the world. One of the things that makes him such an inspiration for me is that he's a Renaissance man. He speaks multiple languages, as far as I know, English, French, Cantonese, and Mandarin, reading and writing as well. So that's quite impressive. He translates ancient Chinese poetry and texts, which is equally impressive. Has a law degree, worked as a law enforcement officer in Hong Kong for many years, fought full contact tournaments, and he does a traditional martial art in Tai Chi Chuan. So that's quite a curriculum, and it's one of the things I try to emulate is in that I think I always had it in me, but it's seeing Dan's example that drove home the lesson like okay, you can do this too. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. For instance, the Tai Chi Chuan that Dan teaches, and he's Patrick's teacher, has been my main style for I think about 22 or 23 years now. It's what I practice the most, but I never stopped practicing combat sports. First it was Sancho, now it's mixed martial arts. So I never stopped that, and I was trained Muay Thai and other stuff. So the showing by example that this combination is possible and that it's okay to do that. I do it in a different way that Dan does, but that's perfectly fine. But showing that you can do that and still have a really high level. Dan did things in training that with 20 plus years into the system and really trying hard and training really hard, I still can't replicate things that I thought were impossible. I'm not going to go into it now, but and it's not woo-woo bullshit. It's just some real practical stuff. Like I don't know how you did that, and I still can't figure it out. Well, I understand the principle behind it, but I can't do it. So showing me that there's a different level to martial arts that I didn't know existed, that I was hoping for, that a lot of people claimed they have, but they were a bunch of frauds. We still have a lot of those, and he actually did that. Um, so he showed me a new path as a martial artist via his student Patrick, my main teacher, and it's a path that I haven't stopped following, that I think I will never stop following. Um, he fights a difficult battle against Parkinson's disease, and he just keeps going. He keeps teaching, he keeps traveling, he keeps going, and that is also an inspiration to me as I work through my own injuries and physical ailments that I've developed throughout the years. So talk about an inspiration, and I want to set the record straight. Dan's still a bit of a controversial figure, which is fine. I don't think he minds all that much. But what I've noticed is that there's a lot of people talking crap about him, and then when you talk to them, turns out that they never even met him. They never even talked to the guy. And I'm like, okay, well, so you're talking about somebody you really don't know, and I actually spent many hours in Dan's company. It was always perfectly fine, always very reasonable and very again very generous teacher. Took his time to explain a lot of things to me that I didn't need to. And one of the most treasured memories that I have of going to seminars when Dan was teaching was going with him, going to his seminars with my teacher, and then Dan would just walk up to us while we were all practicing something that he showed, and he'd just walk over and just start talking about something, and it could be linking whatever technique we were doing to some very ancient mythology that originated in China how many hundreds of years ago, and explain that there's a link between the name of the technique and whatever story that he then shared. Or it could be that he talked about, well, I once used this against a guy when I was in Hong Kong in the police force. So it could be many things, but always interesting, always very interesting. So, so that's what I want to say about Dan. Then there's Lauren Christensen, who in many ways is been both a mentor and father figure to me. I lost my father when I was 18, and Lauren is very smart, very skilled, and extremely experienced, but he's still humble, and he's also very honest about what he did, both the good, the mediocre, the bad, the excellent, anything in between. You read pretty much any of his latest books, and you'll see that he talks very openly about his victories and defeats. And that's one of the things I liked a lot about him, is that it was no macho nonsense. It wasn't trying to prove how tough he was, but also sharing like, hey, this is the time that I threw this big punch and it missed. And that was right after you read a story about this is the time when I threw this punch and the guy's face exploded, so to speak. So he could have chosen to not talk about those negative stories, but he did anyway, to be honest, and to give everybody who reads his books a more accurate idea of what is actually out there, as opposed to the Hollywood fantasies that people like to believe, like we all wanted to believe when we were younger and starting out. So that's one of the things that I try to emulate as well. Be honest and try to be correct and accurate, and show the full picture and not just the pretty picture that people want to see. Lauren took me under his wing when I was much younger. It's thanks to him that I started writing books, and he helped me get my start as a martial art and self-defense instructor on an international level. So I'll always be very grateful to him for that. He also helped me out on a personal level when I was in deep, deep trouble in my personal life. Lauren was there, no questions asked. But one of the biggest things that I would say, as that I try to emulate, because it's hard as you get older and get more experienced. It's easy to fall into that trap. He never ever looked down on me. He never talked down to me, never. And despite me clearly being the junior in the relationship, me clearly knowing less, having less experience, having less training than him, he always was very correct and very polite, and he never gave me that, I'm much older than you, I know better, and I've been in so many fights, and you don't know what you're talking about. None of that, which I have gotten plenty of. Less so nowadays, but like 10, 15, 20 years ago, which I got plenty of from people who didn't even have a fraction of the skill or experience or training that Lauren has. So that's one of the things that I try to emulate as well, is that no matter how long I train, no matter how much I think I am right, I try to remember how I was back in the day, having lots of strong opinions, and a lot of them proved to be wrong. A lot of them turned out that I actually was wrong, or I was only seeing a part of the concept or the topic or what the technique. And Lauren talked, well, one time I used this in this fight and this technique, and this is how it went, or and so on. And I think the combination of his experience and training and mindset is best encapsulated in something that he said to me. And he says, there are no bad techniques. And you see a lot of that nowadays by the younger generation of martial artists who are making a name for themselves, who are primarily on YouTube and social media, and they're like, oh, this technique sucks, worst technique ever, and this and that. And I have some of that, but I usually try to stay away from it. But he said clearly, like, there are no bad techniques. However, there are techniques that are applied at the wrong time, at the wrong place, in the wrong context, against the wrong person. So that was really something that stuck with me forever. Because if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. Something you hear a lot, right? Okay, so how can we make it less stupid? And that's that focus that Lauren has on simple, no nonsense, effective techniques, as opposed to doing things for tradition's sake or for whatever reason. Just focusing on very specific practical techniques and making it work for real, and then figuring out what that means, as opposed to just assuming like, oh well, this is a crap technique and not going to work anyway. Okay, how can you make it work under those circumstances? So that's something that I try to do in all my work as well. Just try to really follow that idea of keep it simple, and then afterwards, and this is my take on things, I add layers on top of it. People often see me talking about those layers, so to speak, higher levels. They're not higher. There's just additional layers that come on top of it once you master the basics. But those basics are still extremely simple, no nonsense. So that's Lauren. And then another teacher of mine, the late Bob Orlando. He was very clearly the best teacher I ever met. He was extremely methodical and an excellent communicator. He was also a straight shooter. He would tell you clearly like what's what. But he was also more of a diplomat than he got sometimes credit for, which I'm not going to go into, but I know it's true. Now, if I'm anything today as a teacher, it's in large part thanks to him, because much of my methods of teaching I actually copied from him and adapted to what I'm doing. He passed away due to ALS. Again, he fought bravely until the end because I was in email communication with him until he could no longer type. And his last emails, he was typing one finger at a time. And just to put that in context, many years ago, I think this must be something like 15 years ago, I hosted him in Brussels here for a bunch of seminars. And he had this, I'm blanking out on the name, but it's like a curved stick with knots on it. And you use it to basically knead out the knots in your muscles on your back because you can't reach your back. And that's what it's for. And he'd been teaching full day seminars from morning until late afternoon for several days. We were doing this tour in Brussels and he forgot to bring that stick with him. And he was in pain. He was very much in pain. And we when I saw that, okay, so let's go back and go get the car and drive home where that stick was. And I could see that as soon as, he sat down on the couch and started working on the knots in his muscles, he was feeling much better. He hardly showed his pain. I mean, I could tell from his expression, but he didn't complain. He didn't say anything. He was just trying to bite through the pain and not be burdened to anybody. Now, as I deal again with my own injuries and my own physical ailments, I try to look at Bob as an example and try to emulate that as much as possible. I think it's part of being a martial artist. It's not hiding that you have injuries and so on, but not overburdening people with them either. Not whining about it. And then finally, a friend of mine, Jerry, I'm not going to say his last name because I don't know if he would want me to, but he's not a well-known practitioner, which I think is a sad state of affairs, but that's up to him. And he would probably say that he's, not necessarily a great fighter or anything, but I'd maybe argue with him over the definition of what a fighter actually is. And a bunch of things actually why I try to emulate the way he goes about things. First of all, we developed a friendship after what is still called today the Tai Chi Wars, where many, many years ago we had a long exchange via email on an email list where we were in opposing positions on how Tai Chi is used in martial art and so on. And it got heated, mostly on my part, not necessarily on his part. And eventually people said, like, guys, do it in private emails. Stop doing it on the list because we're tired of it because it took too long. And that's how we developed the friendship. And one of the things when we kind of wrapped up everything in those huge emails chains is that he said to me is that okay, we're fine. And he said something along the lines of the value of a discussion lies in the exchange and not in the fact that you managed to convince the other person of your position or that you managed to prove them wrong. And that's something that stuck with me for a long time that I try to apply to this day because nobody died and made me God. So I'm probably wrong about a lot of stuff. And even if I'm very convinced that I'm right, maybe I shouldn't press this the whole time. It happens every now and then. I'm human like everybody else. Sometimes lose my patience. I try not to, but I try to really follow that idea of trying to have a discussion and try to get something out of that exchange, whether it's rethinking my own position, whether it's seeing the points of the other person and using that as an additional filter to look at the information I already have. So nobody loses if you have an honest discussion. That seems to be more and more a lost art in these days, which is why I typically don't like to do a lot of discussions on the internet anymore, because most often people aren't honest. When you point out a flaw in their reasoning, they either ignore it, they get upset, or they do use verbal tricks and rhetorical tricks to not have to admit that you scored a point on them. So if people can't be honest, then there's no point. I just like, okay, I'm done. Something else that I try to emulate from him is to think more logically and look at more factors than the ones that are right in front of me. Now he has a degree as a historian, So he looks at martial arts in a different way. He sees context that I never see due to not having been trained like him. Um, and we have a lot of private conversations, and he routinely says something that I didn't know, but that makes sense once he puts everything on the table, and then he makes connections to things that most people wouldn't even consider, and they blow a lot of theories and ideas that you see nowadays from even well-known martial artists. They blow those straight out of the water because in a historical context it just doesn't make any sense. It's just wrong. So, but he doesn't really talk about it publicly all that much, and he lets people be, and I try to do the same thing. So, in a way, he challenges me to not be complacent in my thinking, and to try to think better and try to educate myself, to avoid being one of those guys who's really spotting a lot of nonsense that, like, 10 years later, when you read it again, what you wrote or what you said, that you go like, oh, I could have been so dumb. So it usually happens anyway, but I think the goal should be that you try to avoid it as much as you can. Um, so he challenged me to do that, and to avoid me falling into the trap that I think I know best. So that's pretty much it. There's a lot of people that I could mention for very specific things, which I won't go into. The video is already quite long. I hope you like that answer. If you have any questions, let me know. Guys, if you like, share, subscribe, obviously help spread the word. If you want to support my work, blog, the podcast, everything, go to patreon.com/Demeere. Hit me up there, and you see that we have a bunch of stuff that you might like. And if not, I will talk to you next time.